I'm Mike Vardy.
Meal planning is important because it prevents us from being a disappointed wreck when dinner time comes around and we have no clue what to make, or even if we have the ingredients to make the meal. It's a time and a money saver, but most importantly, it frees up valuable brain space. Creating a meal plan prepares us for the week to come and gives us peace of mind that we're organized and can feed ourselves and our family. That's why I do it, and that's why Plan to Eat helps me do it. Your subscription includes access to the Plan to Eat website and fully featured mobile apps on iOS and Android. And Plan to Eat gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website, the ones your family loves and that fit your dietary preferences and needs. And you can create a meal plan around your schedule. Then what happens is the Plan to Eat software automatically creates an organized shopping list based on your plan. So sign up for your free trial at plantoeat.com/timecrafting. That's plantoeat.com/timecrafting. The coupon will be automatically applied to your account and can be used when you're ready to subscribe. It's valid for new customers only. Give Plan to Eat a try today.
And this is the Productivityist Podcast. So I'd never spent any real time in Atlanta before. I'd driven through Atlanta when I was a kid going to Florida because that was what we did in Ontario to escape the winters. But I never spent an extended period of time there. I did that at NAPO 2016, and I got to meet today's guest there. Mridu Parikh was a treat to be around. I wanted to have her on the show. She is a pro at aligning business goals with structure. So I want to talk about alignment and automation with her today. She's a productivity coach, she's a business strategist, and she is a speaker and a trainer. And what she does is she helps people get clear on their priorities, powerfully manage their time, create efficient systems, and you know how much I love those systems, and embrace life-changing habits. So I had a great time chatting with her on this particular episode during this conversation, as well as, of course, we get to hang out and have lunch together at a cool little pub in Atlanta. So we didn't record that conversation. We surely recorded this one. You're going to hear it now on the Productivityist Podcast. Enjoy. So after a false start, we're totally aligned now, right, Mridu? We're totally aligned for this.
Totally aligned. We're on the same page.
And you know what's interesting is that, I was explaining to you before we recorded that, we made some changes a while ago with regards to the way we introduced the episodes. And it's still not in me. It still hasn't quite automated. I haven't self-automated this where I tell, people I'm chatting with that, oh, by the way, we're going to, there's some stuff we do, some voodoo that I do before we talk. So I'm glad that we got on the same page here. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So speaking of automation, we talked about automation quite a bit on the podcast, especially recently. More so than ever before, because as my business has grown, and as those who listen, those of you out there that are listening, that your business have grown, automation's becoming more essential, and it's easier to do than ever before, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is so simple. I mean, I pride myself on simplicity, and I don't know if it's because I'm lazy or because I just like things simple.
Probably a bit of both. Probably a bit of both.
Probably both. But you don't need any. I mean, you can use all the apps and tools and everything out there, but you really could just use like a Google spreadsheet, a Google Doc. I really say start with the Google Suite, and you can start documenting everything.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about just starting simply, because I think a lot of people, if you've listened to the episode where I talked to Wade Foster of Zapier, and you've read my post about the whole idea of self-automation, a lot of people get overwhelmed by that initially. So you mentioned like starting simply with the Google, can you dive into that and unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think that if we, again, keep it really simple in your mind and think like, I'm just going to make a checklist for everything that I'm doing from the time I start, working my business in the morning to the evening. If we start keeping these types of checklists or just processes really simply documented on, like I said, a Google Doc or Google spreadsheet, that is going to be your first step in sort of automating everything for you. So for instance, you just said something about how the intro to this, how, you just changed it up and we're still sort of learning it and maybe, just making that part of your process. Well, if that's something that, and perhaps you already have this, but let's say if we're back to that Google spreadsheet or that doc and we're writing down, okay, on the beginning of the podcast, tell the person you're interviewing there, how we're going to lay out the call and what the intro is going to be like. And you sort of have this checklist of things you're just going down. That is a sort of a self automation. And so what this does is it frees up so much mental space because you don't have to worry about what did I forget to tell them, or have to spend your time and your energy and your brain power on remembering all the details, right? Things don't fall through the cracks anymore. You sort of, it's just this like self check for you. It's this insurance policy that things are going to get done in the right order. You haven't forgotten anything. And then you can simply take that checklist or that document or that process and pass it on to someone else. If you're training somebody, if you're hiring someone on your team, if you're sharing it just with a colleague and brainstorming, you have that all there. And I also find like when things are written down, that's when you can identify gaps and opportunities. So when you have something written in the, let's say it's a blog post, right? Every week you're doing a blog post and you've been doing this forever and you sort of have all that information up in your head. But when you actually start getting that process down on paper and you're like, okay, well, first I'm going to open up my, MailChimp and then I'm, and all the different steps, you're writing it down. All of a sudden, when you're seeing it visually, you might be able to say, oh, well, you know what? Here's a step that I could either have somebody else do, or I can simplify this, or this seems repetitive, or what, and it also opens it up that way. There's so many benefits of just kind of writing everything down in sort of this checklist format over the course of the day.
When you get into helping people with this kind of thing, I find, and even for me as well, the process of doing this can become overwhelming at first, which is somewhat ironic because it's designed to help you stave off overwhelm in the long run. How do you walk through with the people you work with to make sure that they don't get to the point where they're like, oh, you know what, I'll just do it later, or you know what, it's really not that critical. Like, I mean, when I spoke to Michael Gerber he's got the book now called Beyond the E-Myth. He talks about, again, that idea of working, on your business rather than working in your business, right? How do you kind of help people separate themselves so that they can put these processes in place so they've got more of a balance between a process-driven outcome and a results-oriented outcome?
Well, so I think you hit on something really important about what you just said about Michael Gerber. I think this actually is, to me, this is the working on your business. Like this, to creating the processes to me is like was part of that 5%. If you hear that work on that 5% of your business, to me, this is part of that. So this is what's going to help you streamline, what's going to help you delegate, what's going to help you automate, what's going to help you grow your business, free up your time. So to me, this is such a critical part. But in terms of actually, getting yourself to do it and motivating yourself and making the time, I'd say, start with one project at a time, or one task that you are outlining. Again, if it's how you do your blogs, or how you do your podcast, or how you even have a sales conversation, just start with one. Okay. Start with one thing. Don't try to do 5 of them or 10 of them at a time. We know that's just overwhelming and that, makes you procrastinate one. So pick one, set that time on your calendar as you would any other, task that we're going to be working on, say for, use your Pomodoro technique or whatever tools and tips that you have to make yourself sit down for that 25 minutes or that, 45 minutes of your day to work on that process, and then, continue to schedule it during the week. I definitely think that we overestimate the time that this is going to take. I think it's something that, it may take a week or 2 weeks, but in our minds, we think it's going to take months, and so when we just actually sit down, completely focused, undistracted, and block out that time to work on just one of these processes at a time, I think you'll be amazed how quickly you can get through that.
One of your posts, you talk about the learning curve, the dreaded learning curve. And I've set up a day where I just set aside for I call it training day. And I think you've heard me talk about this, where it's, I learn and I train on that day so that my brain is wired to do that. How, especially during this process, because there is a lot of learning going on. And first off, I mean, we'll unpack this into 2 separate questions, but explain to me, break this blog post down a little bit more, but how do you, because I think the learning curve is something that you're going to have, but how do you make it more palpable, I guess, or palatable is probably the better way to say it.
Sure. So you mean in terms of someone starting this process or
Yeah, or
training
just
someone?
or both. I mean, because the process is in order to, I think starting this process is one aspect of it, but I think in general, I mean, a lot of people are trying to do a lot of things, and when they start to automate some of the things they no longer need to worry about, they're going to try to take on new things, right? They're going to try to learn how to use ConvertKit, or they're going to try to learn how to do a sales funnel or whatever, or they're just going to try to learn how to how to knit. I mean, what are some of your pieces of advice on kind of mitigating that learning curve as much as possible?
Well, so there's one is, of course, research. Researching it, reading the reviews, talking to colleagues, I think is so important. I would imagine that most entrepreneurs or people just starting their businesses are part of other groups, whether it's online or Facebook in trainings or in person. And so just sort of raising your hand or sending out that email or even that quick text that says, hey, I'm considering using, I need an email service provider. What do you guys suggest? And so I think that's a lot because when you're speaking to people who are in similar situations or have similar experience or are where you want to be, they're going to have a perspective that's very different than, let's say, the company that's selling it, or like they're really going to have that firsthand experience. So, number one, I always say just reach out to your peeps and see what their experiences are like. So you've really got to take this culmination of this research, best practices, experience, and then of course just your resources at that time. Based on maybe your monetary resources, your time, your effort. Sometimes you might know that one product is just clearly going to be better, but it's just not doable at this time. Like you just don't have the resources, whether it's your time or your money. So you're going to have to go with the in between, and until you get there. But know that, that learning curve is it's a continuous process, but each time, I will say this, each time it gets easier and easier and easier, right? Because you're sort of are like building up your confidence of knowing, oh, I figured that other thing out last time. I'll figure out the next one. And it actually becomes becomes less and less daunting because you build up the confidence of knowing that I will figure this out,
So you're big on systemizing. I mean, clearly that's a huge thing. And this even becomes a systemizing. I want to talk about alignment because I think that kind of work, that kind of building systems and automations can really lead to alignment when you kind of marry it up with the goals you have. What are your thoughts on alignment? Like, how do you, when you define it, like, how do you look at alignment, especially when you're working with clients?
It's really being crystal clear on your goals and then looking at those goals and being crystal clear on your next actions. And it feels like that should be so easy, right? Because it feels like, well, of course I know my goal. I want to grow my business, or, I want to make more money, or I want to impact more people. It seems like it should be so simple but it's so difficult because we know that those goals are they're really big and they're higher reaching, but that leaves you with so much space and so many options of what to do. What is your actual true goal? Where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And then what are the specific, like really, really specific actions that are going to help you get there? And then how do you prioritize those actions? I know you talk a lot about that because there are always 100 different things we could be doing. So I really help my clients, like once we can get crystal clear on what's your sort of immediate what's your big long-term goal? Yes. But then sort of like, okay, then what are the immediate steps we need to take to start getting there? I really like to work in sort of these 2-week sprints. I find like they really help people take action. I think it's great. Of course, you should have a big goal, have an annual goal, even have quarterly goals. It's great to have a vision. You should know where you're going. But sometimes it doesn't leave you with enough guidance for what to do in the day to day. So if you kind of set up these sort of 2-week goals or 2-week sprints, that then you're like, okay, well, I'm trying to reach this next little step in the next 2 weeks. Now I can look at my day by day over the next 10 days, let's say, and see exactly how I can fit that in and make that happen.
So talk about let's talk about a 2-week sprint, because I find that most people tend to work in week chunks or in month chunks, right? But you've kind of parsed it down to like the 2 weeks. So can you walk me through that process? So, because I find it that I'm not saying it's arbitrary, but it's kind of one of those things where it's not conventional, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. let's say a 2 week goal right now, let's say I want to make some website updates, right? There are specific website updates you want to make. So, and just to back up, you may have 2 or 3 2 week goals. Like
Right.
it's not 10, but it's about, I say up to 3. So you're working on different things simultaneously. You're moving a lot of things. You're moving several things, not a lot of things, a couple or several things at the same time. So at the end of that 2 weeks, you're really accomplished. Like you really move forward. So if we're staying with that one goal about making these website updates, it might be something that you've been procrastinating for a long time, or you just haven't sort of like bit the bullet on exactly what you want to update or what you want to do. And now that you're like, okay, I've given myself that 2 weeks. Now we're going to go back and say, okay, what are the priorities that you have to update? What are the most important things to update in those next 2 weeks? So maybe the most important things are your cart, like the options in your cart. You need to add on a couple more products, and this then means you need the photography and you need the verbiage, and then we'll start breaking that down. Okay, well, day 1, maybe we'll get the photo for this product. Maybe day 2, we'll write the copy. Maybe day 3, we'll work on the shopping cart. Maybe day 4, and we'll start breaking that down so that really over the 2 weeks, you are consistently moving forward every day when you're having some type of accomplishment. It's just motivating you and keeping you inspired to keep moving. And maybe you'll be done before the 2 weeks. Fantastic. But sometimes I just find like the 1 week is just too short to kind of reach something. And then the 1 month again can feel like, oh, I'll get to it next week. And I just have found, and I've just kind of, it's not set in stone, but I have just found that 2 weeks works really well. It's not too short, but it's not too long that you lose sight of your goals.
Right. Now let's talk about how you move those forward with the 2 areas that you talk about. And we talked about this when leading up to the interview, is there's 2 areas that if you want to grow their business, and really, I think it's beyond business too at this point. I think there's a lot of life factor stuff in
Absolutely.
here as well. Is the improvements need to happen in communication and technology. Where are you, when you talk about communication and improving that, what do you mean by that? Do you mean, clearer communication? Do you mean, overall like how do you parse that out when you're talking to somebody? Because, that to me could mean a whole bunch of different things. So when you're saying, you need to improve your communication, and then we'll dive into the tech stuff in a bit. How do you work through that with someone?
So I actually think it's really intertwined, the communication and the technology.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just where we started, which is like that automating or putting out these processes and documenting. That to me is like a communication to yourself. Like number one, making you really crystal clear on exactly what are the steps, what are the next steps, how is this going to look like, how does this unfold? It's communicating. If you have a team, even if you just have a 5-hour-a-week VA, it's communicating exactly to them, crystal clear here, step by step, what to get done. And so that is now intertwined with this idea of this automation, right? Or these simple processes to put it in place. And then you're also being really communicating with yourself really clearly when we're talking about these goals. It's how am I communicating to myself? And again, to the greater team, what are our goals for the next 2 weeks? How are we breaking this down day by day? How am I making time for this? So it's sort of like a self-communication, but also it's in communication. But I think it's sort of just, again, that like, how are we all in alignment? How are we all, whether it's one person or 5 people or 10 people or whatever, moving towards the same goals at the same time, that everyone is really clear of what they're responsible for, what the deadlines are, what we're going to be creating, all of that information.
Let's talk about let's talk about some of the technology tools that you use in order to promote, again, this idea of alignment and automation, because I think that there's some real power behind it. What are some of the technology tools that you use beyond, once you start to dive beyond like the simple stuff that you touched on initially, like what are some of those tools that you use and that you recommend people look at when they're trying to automate more? And I want to say more better, but that's not what I'm going to say. We try to automate more in a way that's going to serve you better.
So I use Asana, which is, again, really, really, really simple. It's like old school project management, file, subfile, file, subfile. So it works well for me. And that's actually where we've created with my team. I have an assistant, that's where we've created all of our processes. So I literally have a project that might say, I'll just go back to, video, blog posts. And in that, we've created It might have 50 steps, literally. It's just step by step by step by step. So every week we'll just duplicate that. So after I write my blog post, I can pass it along to my assistant, and she or he can just duplicate that process, and there are check boxes each one, and just check down each step. So each of the 50 steps are completed. And that way I can see in Asana, which is a project management tool, I can see as tasks are completed. I can see where they are. If there's any confusion or they can write it back to me. We can make that task more clear. We just stay on top of all our projects that way. So that has been a fantastic, really simple, free communication tool for us to help sort of automate that process, to help delegate that process, and for us to stay really clear on our goals and what we're trying to get done.
What led you to Asana? Because I'm a big fan of Asana as well. We use it for Productivityist. There's a lot of tools out there. What was the impetus? Because there's other people will use. I love the fact you can integrate Asana with Slack, of course.
Yes.
There's Zapier, which we talked about a little bit earlier, allows for a lot of integrations there as well. What led you to Asana versus a whole bunch of other tools that are out there? Because there's no shortage of tools, which is, I think, where a lot of people get stuck.
Yeah, I started off with Trello. I had my web developer and an assistant both use that. So I was like, all right, sure, let's just try that one. And for me, I love the visualness of it, but what I had a hard time with Trello was keeping track of multiple projects going on at the same time. They just getting intertwined. I just couldn't see it properly. And maybe it's just, like I said, I'm more old school, that I like folders and subfolders.
Well, and now Asana has boards, so you can actually have that board view if you want. And not everybody does, but it is there.
Yeah. And then honestly, I just tried Asana after that because I'd heard a lot about it. And I think, again, for me, it's the simplicity of it, that it's just so simple. And I love that. And I love some of the features of it. You can see that, assign due dates. You can see where people are. You can check it off. It just works really well for me.
Awesome. Let's talk a bit more about how there's a blog post you wrote about, which I found, especially after reading Stephen Pressfield's Turning Pro, and I've read it a while ago. This is from earlier in the summer last year, where you talk about what got you from amateur to pro, and I love where you talk about the kids, and this is where you and I can kind of we're also aligned in this, in that we have kids, and we work, you work from home, right? So. You mentioned that you always used your kids as an excuse for the impact and income you could make. I want to. Can you dive into that a bit deeper? I know we're going a little. I think this does have quite a bit to do with alignment, because I struggle with the same thing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I say in that for the longest time when my kids were young, that was exactly what I said. I would use them as an excuse. Like, I only have a certain amount of hours in my day. How can you expect me to grow this? I would tell my husband, I don't have the time for this. So I'm doing some other things. And I say, when things changed for me, or when I went from amateur to pro, was instead of using them as an excuse, I use them as a motivation. And so instead of I only have 4 hours in a day, now I'm like, I only have 4 hours a day. I better make it super, super productive. I better make it super efficient. And I think that just sort of, when you have that change of mindset, that's when you're looking for these types of things. You're like, how can I automate things? Where can I delegate? How can I make it? How do I stay super focused and in alignment on what's important, right? I always say, focus on the right things. I help people focus on the right things. There's a million things, especially when you're working from home, because it's just in your face all the time, right? The kids are screaming, the laundry, and the dish, and there's just so much more sort of just visual stuff around you. And so to keep your headspace and your mind just really focus on the right things. What are the right things that are going to move my business, are going to move the needle in my business forward right now, today? And so I think that to me was sort of the turning point, to be just to look at them differently, or look at my situation instead of being like, oh, woe is me. Now it's like, oh, this is this is like a gift almost, like, I mean, I'm sure I didn't think that way, but I was like, okay, I just got to make this work as best as I can. This is going to help push me to make me more efficient.
That wraps up this week's episode, Mridu. Thanks so much for joining me. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to learn more about what you do and how to get more aligned and automated in the process?
Absolutely. Come on over to lifeisorganized.com or lifeisorganized.com/pro. And that will get you over to all the business hacks and productivity tools. And I also love for your audience to come on over to lifeisorganized.com/productivityist. And you can get a free download there called the 21 Powerful Productivity Hacks for Your Biz. And so, yeah, I think it would love to see you. And I'm also really active over on Facebook, Life is Organized.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Now, the story doesn't end there. Sure, this interview does, at least for people who are listening to the public edition of the podcast. But for those of you who are supporting the show through Patreon and our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/productivityist, you're going to hear more things such as what the perfect to-do list is and things of that nature. Mridu and I continue the conversation, and we want you to be part of it. Head over to patreon.com/productivityist. Find out about all the bonus content that's there, because in 2017, we upped the ante there. You're getting the weekly episodes early, before anybody else. You're getting 2 bonus episodes per week now, one with a guest that has either been on the show or will be on the show in a full-length interview, as well as thoughts and discussions and ideas that I have just on my own in another bonus episode. All that you get for as little as $1 a month as a supporter. And there's a ton of other perks there too. So head over to patreon.com/productivityist to learn more about that. If you like this episode and or every episode before this one, leave a rating or review in iTunes. Even if you think we need to improve on some stuff, I'd love to hear about you there, because what happens is that my podcast producer, John Polster, looks at it. I look at it. We figure what we can do to make the show better. A few months ago, we heard you wanted better show notes. Done. We heard from our Patreon supporters they wanted more content, and they wanted to make it a little bit easier to digest. Done. We will do it. We want to hear from you. Feedback is always appreciated. That's it for this week's episode. I appreciated you listening to it. I appreciate John Polster for producing the show, and I appreciate Mridu for joining me on the show this week. That's it for this week. Until next time, I am your host, Mike Vardy, the Productivityist founder and the host of the podcast, reminding you to stop guessing and start going.